morning, Felix. Really pleased to meet you here at ACC in Chicago. And one of the highlights of this meeting was the final release of the results of Innovate-HF, a trial with the biocontrol vagal nerve stimulation. You have been very much into these device trials, and especially in heart failure. There are lots of lessons to take from this trial. So I'd like to have your view, maybe summarize very shortly the main result, and then how the cardiovascular community trialists, what kind of lesson they would learn from this.
Well, Innovate-HF was a trial in heart failure patients, ejection fraction below 40%. They did an open label controlled randomized study, so patients received either in a 3-to-1 fashion, received either vagal nerve stimulation with a dedicated device or optimal medical therapy in the other group. It was open label. Primary endpoint was freedom from heart failure endpoints such as unplanned heart failure events. And they had a bunch of secondary endpoints, including symptomatology. And unfortunately, the DSMB stopped the trial in December because of futility. They released the data today, and there's absolutely no difference between the two groups in terms of the primary endpoint. Again, that was freedom from heart failure endpoints and freedom from unplanned heart failure events. Though the secondary endpoints, as I mentioned, symptomatology, improvement in New York Heart Failure Association class, 6-minute walking distance, these parameters, these kind of weak parameters, they significantly improved in patients receiving vagal nerve stimulation, whereas there was no difference in left ventricular systolic volume index, so a perhaps robuster parameter than these symptoms that improved. It adds to the field, as you mentioned, as you know better than I do, in NECTAR-HF, pretty much the same happened, right? Symptoms improved with that implantation, but the hard endpoints or the harder endpoints, they were, not different between the two.
So what is your explanation of disconnect between these improved in symptom and nothing happened to the hard endpoints?
Well, the easiest interpretation might be that it is an open label study, right? So you got an implantation, you got a surgery, you got aware of your disease, and then you feel an improvement, though that is not related to the technology that has been implanted. But there might be other things happening. So it might well be that, there is something pleiotropic effects of vagal nerve stimulation. We talked about reduction of inflammation, potential pleiotropic effects. We have to see and we have to understand whether that is really occurring in these vagal nerve stimulation trials or whether that is just related to the study design and an open label conduct.
So in this space, you've mentioned the NECTAR-HF. This is the second trial, which is neutral. There are other ways to mitigate the autonomic nervous system. So where are we heading with this technology in heart failure? Whether after such a big mortality trial, would that stop everything, or we need to get back and do the hard homework first?
I think the major problem, and that holds true for vagal nerve stimulation, for renal denervation, wherever you go, it remains unclear whether or not you really did neuromodulation in that specific patient. I would love to see the heart rate data out of Innovate-HF that has not been presented today. So it would be interesting to see whether or not patient changed heart rate throughout the study period and whether patients with a change, a reduction in heart rate, were those potentially improving. So unless we haven't identified a parameter during the procedure for renal denervation or at follow-up for vagal nerve stimulation, it will be very, very difficult to have a proper interpretation of the results. And yet, as you know, these devices are improving continuously. There are new devices, new leads, new programs, new programming of the devices, and we have to understand whether or not that helps this revision of technique and technology to improve outcomes.
Yeah, my own take is that there is a disconnect between the technology, which is moving real fast, and the methodology and designs of trials where we may need to refine these better in order to maximize the likelihood of benefit. So what is left in this space? The DEFEAT trial also was so-so, Innovate and NECTAR. You have been pioneering renal denervation. So is renal denervation entering in the heart failure area on the one hand, and then if you have a few words about the CVRX, baroreflex stimulation, whether these are different?
For renal denervation, I can mention that there are trials ongoing currently where renal denervation is tested in a sham-controlled fashion to see whether or not that is improving outcomes in patients with heart failure. Results yet to come. Baroreflex stimulation, they published their paper at the end of last year in JACC Heart Failure. That was positive actually for the device. So baroreflex stimulation was beneficial in patients with chronic systolic heart failure. More to come, I think. The devices are, as I mentioned, improving, and we need good, proper designed new studies where we have to work on to understand which device in which patient. So patient selection, I think, will play an important role in future trials, which patient will benefit from device-based therapies.
And in very few words, what lessons trialists would learn from this very big disappointment from Simplicity 3, the most recent disappointment from this InnovATE-HF. Of course, something is related to technology, but from the designing trial, you have been discussing blinding and sham, and what is the ideal protocol, just in a few words?
I think sham is difficult to bypass now with all the devices that have been tested in that way and showed no beneficial effect compared to sham treatment. So sham appears to be a must. But you know, as an interventionalist, there's also the must of understanding whether or not you really did what you intended to do. So whether the patient received vagal nerve stimulation or renal denervation, all this has to be tested. And we need parameters of response, we need parameters and predictors of really testing that we delivered what we intended to deliver.
Thank you so much. As you said, there is much to come, and I hope we'll have many more of these trials to play with, and hopefully some hope for the patient from these technology, which are very promising, but still disappointing at this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Faiez.